Open forum is really to bring you different perspectives from all these wonderful panelists. They will be introducing the minutes, but before that, I have a few people to thank for putting on the event. We have UT Global Studies Program, Asian Studies Program, Department of History, and also I want to thank our partner, TNCN China Network. And now I will hand the microphone over to Elizabeth Rowland, the Executive Director, who will introduce our moderator. Thank you. Thank you. You all hear me okay? My name is Rachel Gregg.
Thank you, Rachel. My name is Elizabeth Rowland with Tennessee China Network. We're a 501c3 nonprofit to educate and connect people in Tennessee that do business with China. And we're so happy to be hosting this event with UT today. I also want to thank our event sponsor, APIX East Tennessee Chapter. Thank you, John, for helping with that. During Q&A, we will have the opportunity for the audience to ask questions, as well as for folks in our webcast and on Facebook Live to ask questions. So on the webcast, which is through Zoom, anyone listening on Zoom, you can send us questions via the comment box, or on Facebook Live, the comment box. Or if those don't work for some reason, feel free to text me. We'll get your questions here somehow. And my number is 865-387-7012. If you can't hear on the Zoom, please text us that as well, and we'll try to fix it. We will go ahead and get started with our moderator, John McDevitt. He is Senior Director of Supply Chain Management at Radio Systems Corporation, and he's very kind enough to bring us a lot of goodies outside, some cups and I don't know, all kinds of journals and coolers, so feel free to take one of those when you leave. And thank you, John, for that. Before I pass it over, two last things. Please fill out the event surveys on your chair before you leave. You're welcome to fill them out as we do the event if you want. And silence your phone so we don't have them ringing in the middle. All right, thank you so much, and I'll pass it over to John.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I don't know how she broke me into this, so moderating an event. It's the first time, so I'll do my best to keep the questions simple, and more importantly, it's really for the audience to ask questions. And, we're just gonna, if there's lulls in the conversation, and we have some scripted stuff that we would like to ask the panelists. So as we get through this, you know, please participate, because I think it's really important we hear from you. So I'm going to introduce the panel here. I'm going to start with Susan Lawrence, Ph.D. professor in the Department of History. And then I have Mark Rasnake, MD, the Internal Medicine Program Director at the UT College of Medicine. And Stevie Hayes, International Operations Manager with DeRoyal. Spencer Gregg, Director of Student Health Center, Internal Medicine, and Charity Menefee, she's the Director of Communicable and Environmental Disease and Emergency Preparedness with the Health Department. So we can, if you want to say more about your roles, we could do that, or we could start off with some questions.
Should we start off with questions, or should we start off with our little prepared remarks? I think prepared remarks. Okay. We were all given 5 minutes to give you a little introduction to our perspectives. So I'm bringing you sort of perspective from a historian of medicine. And I have to let you know that this is not our first time experiencing pandemics or epidemics by any means. And every time we have one, we learn a great deal. Those lessons are not always applied very carefully to the next generation, the next time they come around. But gradually over time, we have gotten a lot better at dealing with pandemics. But That doesn't mean that there aren't things that we cannot prepare for. And that's one of the things that we do learn from history is that pandemics breed a lot of fear. And they breed fear that is not helped by secrecy, that is fed by misinformation, and of course social media fans that even more nowadays. We're afraid because of all the uncertainty. It's the lack of knowing exactly what's going to happen that makes us feel so anxious. And that's true whether we're here or, of course, whether we're in China. It is that sense of uncertainty. I also want to note that one of the consequences often of fear is that local areas have a shortage of resources. And one of the things that we know from epidemics and pandemics is that when that happens, sometimes because of quarantine, sometimes because of for other reasons, those local communities suffer a kind of magnified damage that comes not just from the disease itself, but from what happens to people who are sick and don't have the disease, but no longer have access to adequate medical resources. Or even in the case of some pandemics in the past or epidemics in the United States, one in particular in Chinatown in 1900 with the bubonic plague, people are quarantined and then they go hungry because there is no ability to deliver food. So I call that the kind of magnification effect that comes with a pandemic. We also have always, unfortunately, that underlying fear of others that leads people to feel comfortable about expressing ideas about other people that they normally might not. And that fear of differences can lead to xenophobia, to racism, to discrimination on the basis of class, to the discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation. All of those things have happened in the past. And so we need to be very careful about, I would argue, how we deal with those feelings that people express as a community and try to rein back, allowing people to blanketly make assumptions about people who are suffering from these diseases. Rumors also are right out there about, the ability to prevent this disease or to cure the disease, and then people end up, wasting their money because they read something on social media that is supposed to help when it's useless. Political decisions that we face or that people in China are facing, no matter how much based on sound epidemiological principles, do cause social and economic disruption. And that's what the panel is going to talk about today. In particular, the side effects that come from our now global society. And I just want to end by saying that one of the most fragile commodities during an epidemic or a pandemic is the loss of trust that we can have in political authorities or in scientific authorities. And I just want to stress that one of the things that we know from the past is that when people do keep faith in the authorities, the people who with expertise, the people whose job it is to manage these events, then things go much smoother. But it can require that every community has to sometimes voluntarily step up and make some sacrifices. Hopefully that won't come to that here in Tennessee, but that might be, in the long run. I'm a historian, we think big. Maybe not this time, but next time. So a final plug is that one of the things that happens always is we learn so much and people get geared up about, oh my gosh, this is all happening. And then when it goes away, we have a lack of interest in continuing to fund the programs that actually allow us to be prepared. So I would argue that we need to keep in mind in the future that being prepared is what we would want us to be right now, instead of feeling perhaps a little bit lost. So that's the historian's perspective.
Good evening. I'm Mark Rasnake. I'm an infectious diseases physician, and also I work as the hospital epidemiologist at UT Medical Center. And my hat that I would wear in response to something like this is twofold. My major job is direct patient care for people with infectious diseases, one-on-one medicine, but I have a significant role in population health, and it's preparing a major medical center to potentially respond to an influx of contagious patients. And this isn't something new for us. There is an emerging disease that grabs headlines just about every year. It's not Ebola, it's SARS, or Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, MERS, or it is the new coronavirus that's now popped up. And the pandemic influenza of 2009 was a major stress point for us as a medical center, both from an individual patient care, how do you help this person with this disease, but how do you protect your staff and the global pool of patients that you're taking care of at your medical center. So right now, our discussions on coronavirus are largely focusing on preparedness. We haven't had any individual patient care decisions we've had to make with this coronavirus. But what about coronaviruses in general? What are they and what do they cause? I would speculate that everyone in this room has had coronavirus at some point in their life. There are 4 human coronaviruses that transmit every year, and they cause the common cold. They cause relatively mild to moderate respiratory symptoms, and in some cases, they can cause pneumonia. They can cause more severe infections. So those are the coronavirus infections that we all see. And we never really identified them before the last couple of years, but we now have some advanced respiratory panels that detect pathogens that we just couldn't grow in culture or do blood tests for. Now that we have these advanced respiratory panels, we see coronaviruses all the time. They've been with us. These coronaviruses are all closely related to the newly emerged coronavirus in China. And it's likely that they all started as some kind of worldwide new epidemic back in history, sometime that we just don't have records of, no way to get that record. That spread around, caused a lot of disease, and then just became a background respiratory virus. It's very closely related to the SARS coronavirus, the coronavirus that emerged back early in my career as an infectious diseases physician in the early 2000s. That caused a lot of disruption, economic impact, especially to Hong Kong, to China, to Canada in particular, had a major hit from that. But it didn't become a generalized global epidemic. It never really impacted the San Antonio area where I was practicing at the time, and only a handful of centers in the United States had coronavirus issues. The new coronavirus, yet to be seen what happens to it, what the long-term impact will be, what the global spread will be. It seems to be bigger than SARS in terms of number of people infected currently, and it seems to be more contagious perhaps than SARS was. But it remains to be seen how more significant it will be. In terms of what you hear about mortality rates and contagious statistics, it's a little too early in an epidemic for anyone to say for sure what the long-term numbers are going to be once this is established itself. So what we're preparing for right now is best case scenario, it goes away and it kind of dies out in the communities it's currently spreading in. And in the worst case scenario, it becomes kind of a global epidemic and we'll have to deal with cases here locally. And we will respond to that with the same plans that we prepared to respond to pandemic influenza. The challenges we would have with coronavirus is it currently has no vaccine and there aren't any established antivirals to treat the disease with. The recent data that I see from this coronavirus that's encouraging to me is there's not a lot of spread being documented outside of Hubei province in China. The cruise ship is the notable exception. And my experience as a military physician tells me why that's the case. We had outbreaks of adenovirus, and a novel strain emerged while I was there in San Antonio that caused a lot of disease in a basic training population in closed, confined environments. But it didn't really spread to the community. It didn't become a generalized, widespread epidemic. So the cruise ship is kind of the ideal place to spread a respiratory virus to a high degree of contagion. I think it's up to over 500 people. But the cruise ship also gives us some encouraging information, and it's not everyone that's getting this respiratory virus even gets symptoms. I think over half the cases that are testing positive with this don't even have symptomatic illness. What's not known is do these patients without symptoms transmit the infection to others. It'll take a while before that sorts itself out. So the information with this kind of changes on a daily basis. How we would respond to this changes on a daily basis as we get more information from public health authorities and from the numerous researchers that are engaged on this virus. And we'll adapt our plans as we need to. So that's all I have for virus stuff.
Hi, my name is Stevie Hayes. I'm the operations manager at DeRoyal. A little feedback about what DeRoyal does. We are a local medical device manufacturer here in Tennessee. So my input is a little different than the rest of the panel because I'm here to discuss more of the supply chain aspects. As a medical device manufacturer, we depend on China for some of our raw materials that make the products that are in the hospitals today. And we also are selling into China some of the same products. Today, DeRoyal itself has kind of positioned themselves more in the Americas from a manufacturing standpoint, which allows us to kind of contain more of the supply chain in this area. That is a positive in this scenario since right now products are not coming out of China. They're kind of being held there at the ports until they can be shipped out. So it is a growing concern for many of our customers because DeRoyal does sell products around the world. So each day customers are coming to us wanting to understand what we're doing to be prepared in the long run. Today we are kind of going at status quo. I mean, we have prepared, we have backup suppliers. We look to see alternatives that we can offer, and we are in communication with our suppliers there in China and elsewhere to plan ahead. We don't have to list their pay. Another side where DeRoyal is really working to push is to help our suppliers and vendors there locally in China and our customers there and reach out. They're coming to us looking for simple products such as facial protection and gowns and things. And even if we don't offer it today, we are trying our best to go and find that for them to help those communities and those in need. Thankfully, China has lifted some of the registration requirements, similar to the FDA in the U.S., so that we are able to promote and send products without going through that rigorous process. So we can get the products that are needed to help prevent spreading the disease and, treating what we can and we know to be. So, again, kind of a takeaway that anyone should look at from a supply chain standpoint is making sure you are covering yourselves from different areas. Don't always get everything from one location. These things happen. I mean, we have pandemics, epidemics, this, but there's also natural disasters, hurricanes, tsunamis and things that we have to plan for. So if you're getting everything in one region, you're kind of going to hurt yourself and everyone else around you that depends on you. So we're happy to say that we're able to help those in need, but also that we're going to be able to still service our local accounts. We want to make sure that we're getting them everything that they need, so in case it does come this way, or we just treat whatever someone might.
Hey, good evening. I'm Dr. Spencer Gregg. I'm an internal medicine physician and am the director of the Student Health Center here on campus UT, and I'm also a member of the Campus Emergency Response Team. And so what I'd like to do tonight is kind of tell you the steps that we go through at the Student Health Center in regard to addressing specifically the coronavirus. The steps that we follow are those that are recommended through the Center for Disease Control. And our staff has already been briefed in regard to this. We're already asking questions in regard to coronavirus. So I want to make you aware, and a number of you here are students, so make you aware if you come to the Student Health Center, how you're going to be potentially questioned in regard to travel and your medical history. I want to say, first of all, that presently the University of Tennessee Student Health Center has encountered no students meeting the CDC's criteria requiring further investigation for coronavirus infection, nor have we been advised of any students, faculty, or staff presently under investigation or infected. So just kind of put that out there. Currently, the procedures that we go through at the Student Health Center are the same kind of procedures that we would do every year about this time. And that's because it's flu season right now in East Tennessee. And so the things that we're going to ask is, if you come in and you've been running a fever, or you have a cough or respiratory symptoms, we're going to offer you a mask, and we're going to somewhat insist that you put it on. And that's primarily to protect other patients. We're also going to let you know that distributed throughout the health center are plenty of alcohol cleanser stands for your hands, and we have those in each of our exam rooms as well. And we're going to encourage you to use those. At least before you leave the health center, we want to make sure that you use them. All of our patients have been screened for international travel for several years now. And the time span within which we're concerned about that travel depends upon what particular disease we may be concerned about. So prior to this point, we were asking, have you been outside of the country within the past 21 days? With the coronavirus, we're presently asking that question within the past 14 days, because that's what is considered an incubation period. So I just want to kind of run through with you how we would normally address this. Fortunately for our staff, they're on cheat cards, so it's really easy for them to remember all the questions that they need to ask. If international travel is confirmed in a patient at the Student Health Center, then they're going to be questioned on the location of that travel. And now, specifically, we're going to inquire about travel to, from, or within China. We also now inquire as to whether someone has had a potential exposure to someone that has been diagnosed with the coronavirus infection within the past 14 days. If the patient's travel history within the past 14 days includes China, or if the patient has had close contact with a person with known coronavirus infection within the past 14 days, then we're going to inquire if they have symptoms. And that is primarily going to be do they have a fever, or a cough, or shortness of breath. If any of those symptoms are present in this patient, then we're going to place that patient in an isolated exam room. And we're going to have staff that are dedicated to taking care of that one patient. They're not going to be dealing with a multitude of other patients. And those staff members will be appropriately donned in protective equipment, personal protective equipment. Once the attending provider has assessed that patient, they will contact the Knox County Health Department. The Knox County Health Department has asked us to provide them some specific information on these patients. One is, do they have a fever? And if they do, what was it? Or was it just subjective? They thought they had one at home, but we're going to provide that information as well. And then what are their respiratory symptoms? And what is their travel history? If we determine that a patient is free of symptoms, yet they're still potentially an at-risk patient because of someone that they've been around or because of their travel history, then we're still going to get in touch with the Knox County Health Department. We're going to get their recommendations on how to best address those patients. We work closely during these kinds of situations with both the local and state health department. And we get a lot of our recommendations from the CDC as well, just off the website, which is available to everyone. The second issue I want to make you aware of is that the University of Tennessee is concerned for the safety, health, and well-being of all students, faculty, and staff. Therefore, when faced with public health threat like coronavirus, the university, in consultation with our partners at KCHD, Department of Health, CDC, will take all appropriate measures to ensure your safety and health. The university has a robust emergency planning process that's under the direction of the university's Office of Emergency Management. This planning process follows the guidelines as set forth by the Department of Homeland Security, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, under what's called the National Incident Management System. A lot of stuff going on in the background that you're not aware of. This is called the NIMS program. It's kind of like the way that most communities are now addressing these kinds of emergency instances, regardless of what it calls, tornado, or whatever it may be. As part of our management planning and as part of this program, we have a pandemic response plan. Presently, the university is in phase 1 of that pandemic response plan. But don't let that scare you. Phase 1 is where we're always at. We're always planning for what's coming down the road. What are we going to do next? Who do we need to be contacted? What information do we need to get out? So we're currently in that phase 1. If we determine that we need to move up, then in consultation with campus officials, then we'll make that determination and we'll communicate that to the community as well. Our planning committee has met already and will continue to meet on a regular basis to stay abreast of the current circumstances. And of course, we'll stay in contact with the Knox County Health Department. They've probably already heard from me more than they want to, and with the Tennessee Department of Health as well. And we'll provide any appropriate recommendations to the university officials and to the campus community as situational change may warrant. The goal of our planning and our recommendations is to safeguard the health and well-being of all students, faculty, and staff. And one final point I want to bring out. In the event of a local communicable disease outbreak, the university will provide information to all students, faculty, and staff through their usual means of communication, including, if required, notification to the campus emergency alert system. The university has a multitude of ways to get information out to the community. Outlets such as regular newsletters that we put out to students or parents or faculty and staff, on-campus publications that we have. The university can also distribute broadcast emails through your UTK EDU account. And they do that to faculty, student, and staff. And we can also utilize the emergency alert system to send out information or immediate alerts to your UTK.edu account, as well as to those who have opted into our emergency alert system through your cell phone. So this is a good time to plug for that. If you've not plugged into the emergency alert system, this would be a good time for you to do that. The UT Student Health Center and the university have been preparing for emergency events for many years. As with any emergency situation, our preparations have to remain flexible, and we have to be adaptable. As the coronavirus infection remains a very fluid situation, we anticipate that our plans will have to be adapted to meet those demands. And we will keep the safety and well-being of our campus community at the forefront of our planning and our responses.
Hello, I'm Charity Menefee. I am the Director of Communicable and Environmental Disease and Emergency Preparedness at Knox County Health Department, and I am so glad that I get to go last because I can touch on some things that all of you said, I think, and kind of bring it home for what we do, which is really trying to have a three-pronged approach to how we're managing this. And so the first bit of it is to know that this is, on the public health side, really a multi-layered approach from the locals to the state to the federal government, really trying to mitigate and minimize the spread of this virus within the United States and mitigate the impact of that. So that's kind of the big picture overall piece of that. But then the other pieces, and it kind of touches on the trust piece, I think, that Dr. Lawrence talked about, some other things, is getting factual information out. We spend a lot of time doing interviews, being here on this panel, really trying to talk about the risk that is associated with this, and then the planning that goes on in the background to prepare us for these types of events. And we always joke around that we're kind of like the men in black, and if you don't know about us, that's a good thing because we're doing our jobs. And so we do a lot of planning around these events, just like Dr. Rasnake's talked about and Dr. Gregg's talked about. You know, the big piece that I see for local public health and where we can really have an impact is kind of being the conveners and being at the table with all of these folks way before events happen. And so, you know, we know each other, we talk to each other. Dr. Gregg's talking to our office constantly. I talk to Dr. Rasnake's folks that are here, Brian Gard from Emergency Management here at the university. We all work together, we know each other well before these events, and that can really help, I think, build, when you know that, when you know those relationships are there, can help with that trust to know that we're talking about these things and trying to figure out solutions together. So I think that's really important. So the other thing that we're really trying to get out there is this is an evolving situation, and with these evolving and emerging events, things change. You should expect guidance and information to change as we learn more. Dr. Rasnake kind of hit on that a little bit. Here's what we know today, right now, and then there's more science and more data that we need to collect. So expect that and try to find the really good resources of information that you can get to get that factual information and guidance. You can get that from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's website. If you're wanting kind of a more international perspective and knowing what's going on in other countries around the world, go to World Health Organization, they have its website. They put out situation reports every day with new information that is fabulous. Tennessee Department of Health has a lot of information, and then you can always call us if you have questions or concerns in our epidemiology and emergency preparedness division at Knox County Health Department. And the number is on your handout, but we're always happy to take questions and concerns and try to answer those questions and alleviate concerns as much as possible. But I think it's really about building that community approach and making sure that we're in contact with our healthcare partners and having a real systemic viewpoint on how we're managing these events. And that's from, working with travelers that are coming in and talking to folks that may be impacted and have been to an affected area and figuring out what that looks like for them and being in touch and communicating with them all the way through to how we work with our healthcare partners and hospitals and others, the EMS partners that are actually having direct patient care as well. So we're all on the same page. Oh, I did say it's not a good public health talk if I don't say to wash your hands 3 times. So here's one, wash your hands, because it would help. And get your flu shot also. Thank you, Dr. Rasnake.
All right, so before I put questions out to the audience, I just want to give you a little background on my role at Radio Systems. I'm responsible for the global supply chain. We have a team of 90 people in China, in Shenzhen area, some in Shanghai, some in Tianjin. And one of the things, that working with those people over the past 3 weeks is, I think last night I was on a conference call and they were in their 22nd day of isolation. And I was really getting to the reflection of, how China's been growing so rapidly, so fast. And everybody seems to be working really hard and really late at night and keeping up with it. But this downtime has people reflecting. And so I don't want to represent everybody, but a few people I've talked to, just health's more important than money. The family's starting to, hey, I really like these people. So there's a lot of good that's coming from some of this, but I wonder about the social impact. And I know that, Susan, you started off with, the history. I think you were hitting on things that I didn't think we would talk about today, but it really, the fear, the uncertainty, really separating facts from what's real. And, facts from these myths or rumors. And for me, there is a people impact here. Yeah, all our businesses, we're going to find a way. In the supply chain story of, you got to have risk mitigation plans. As we create those, what I'm finding is all roads lead back to China on raw materials, the rare earths. They're connected somehow, some way. China's connected to that. So it really does make these risk mitigation plans a little more difficult. So, so I can put it out to we have some, from the audience, if you have questions for the panel, anything that was said, there's a lot of really good stuff out there. Shared. We have microphones.
Yes, we do. Hi, yes. There's been a recent case of the coronavirus breaking out in Tennessee. Is that worrying to you guys in your preparedness program, or is it just going to be treated as it's supposed to?
We do not have, okay, so back to what Dr. Rasnake said, we do have normal everyday circulating coronaviruses that happen all the time, and we do get calls about this frequently right now because people are confused. There are no, at this point in time, cases of novel coronavirus or COVID-19 in Tennessee right now. No active cases of that.
I didn't want to speak to that specifically until I heard if news had changed over the last couple hours. It could happen at any moment. Someone could show up at our hospital today with coronavirus, and how we would respond to that patient is the same as we would respond to a patient with potentially contagious tuberculosis. We would treat that patient, we would manage their symptoms, we would put them in a facility that had appropriate air handling so that it didn't jeopardize other patients. We would wear respirators to protect our staff and use our protective equipment, and we would offer medical care to that patient to do everything we could to get them through.
I have a question specifically for Dr. Hayes. There's been in China with you, since you have an exchange system with China going on over medical devices, there's been a ban on raising prices on medical devices within China. Are you, as a foreign company, still adhering to those kinds of guidelines, or?
In this, our main goal is not to go out and raise prices and try to export the situation. As we know, we want to help, and that's one of our main missions, of course, is providing quality healthcare products. So going out and trying to raise prices. Unfortunately, there are people out there who are willing to take advantage of the situation, and they're going to extort, spike up prices. But no, we're not looking to do that, and we wouldn't want to jeopardize ourselves for that.
Thank you.
Well, I want to add to that, because we just had, I sent 1,000 masks over to our team, and I think I paid $2 a mask. It was not cheap. But what I heard is that the government has come in and is controlling pricing on masks and things like that. So it's sort of the bad guys and the black hat type of retailers, they're trying to control that. They already saw things happening.
Actually, one other thing, some of our customers reached out to us because China went to a tendering process for facial protection and other protective equipment. And so they, set that standard of what's acceptable on price range. So that's something else that we've been working on to help supply the needed products and the quantity. And of course, they're doing that to ensure that the pricing is going to stay the same. But yes, I can say you're looking around $2 for a face mask.
So I have a question about how you think the virus would spread if it did get to Tennessee. So as far as I understand, the virus hasn't spread person to person in the United States yet, right? Great.
I think that might be me. So in the United States, there are, as of walking in the building today, 15 cases in the United States of novel coronavirus. Of those 15, 13 of those were travel associated. They had been to an area that had it. 2 of the 15 were person-to-person transmission and very close contacts for those individuals, like household type contacts. So not widespread person-to-person transmission, which is where we're doing a lot of risk assessments, and that's where all the questions that Dr. Gregg told you were asking, and others will probably talk about, that's where that comes in. So where have you traveled? What are your symptoms? Have you been in contact with a known case, not somebody that I've passed in the airport, something like that? We want really specific information, and then that helps us do a full risk assessment on what actions to take from there.
As far as I know about the virus itself, it doesn't seem to be, medically as deadly as we've sometimes been heard. As far as I know, it really only has a big chance for death to elderly and children or people with a compromised immune systems. So has it been propagated by me as to be more scared about it? Because as far as I know, and if I'm wrong, please correct me, as far as I know, it's not really that deadly of a virus at all.
So that's an unanswerable question at present in terms of how deadly it is. One of the things that you typically see with emerging viruses is you notice the most severe cases first. The people that are the sickest are the ones that get your attention. And so they're the first ones you study, and the initial mortality rates for things are based on the people that are sick enough to show up at hospitals. And as public health authorities start to cast a wider net, then you realize there are a lot of sick people that aren't sick enough to go to the hospital. They just have a cold and the mortality rate drops. And then you cast a wider net and you realize there's a lot of people that have this virus that didn't even get sick. They didn't even have symptoms. And then the mortality rate per case does go down. And so as the mortality rate tends to drop, unfortunately, the contagiousness estimate tends to go up because you realize there are more cases than the sickest ones. And so for right now, I don't think it's as bad as it was initially estimated to be, but there's a couple healthcare workers that have died compared to this virus, and they're not necessarily elderly and immunocompromised, but they have heavy, intense exposure, and are likely working themselves to an extreme degree of fatigue, so they might have reasons that they're. But we've had a couple healthcare workers in China that have expired with this, and one was just reported in the news today, the director of one of the hospitals. And those are kind of the heroes of this. So that tells me we still have to treat this with respect, but how bad it is, I think it's too early to tell. Charity?
I agree. And it's a really hard question to answer this early, but everything Dr. Rasnake says is kind of the same message that we're giving to folks at this point as well.
Thank you. I had that same question in mind as well, so I appreciate that great answer. We have a question from Zoom in Memphis. Chelsea Cravens of Denevent Logistics asks for our business panelists and moderator, are you considering other sourcing outside of China in the future to diversify your origins and avoid future issues? And also for future questions, if you could just say your name and your company, or if you're a student or whatever, so that we can get to know each other through this process.
So I'll start. So we've been diversifying for about 5 to 10 years now, and outside of China. So starting in Vietnam, we started in Ho Chi Minh, now we have stuff in Hanoi. And, but our technology, our teams, where we operate from are still in Shenzhen. And it's moving a supply chain that's matured over 20 years. Not so easy. So it requires a lot of effort. And this is where we've discovered that a lot of the component supply chains are still connected to China in some way. That's our experience.
For DeRoyal, like I said, we already kind of have diversified in many ways, going more towards Costa Rica, Guatemala, Dominican Republic, and here in the States. So again, we do depend on it. And again, many of the components are the actual raw materials. A significant amount is going to come from China. So until others are going to be able to step up, I think, and provide some of those raw materials, it's going to be hard for us to move away from China completely. And it's not something anyone really wants to do either, because there's so much opportunity there. There's such a reach there to other areas. So again, it's just always making sure you're diversified.
I always think about Asia. We do have in Guadalajara, but we've also built up the U.S. base. We're probably 5 times the spend than we were a few years ago. So we're finding good opportunities in some of our larger products in the U.S. So I think that getting closer, nearshoring is definitely a strategy that we're exploring and have been. Good question.
I will. This I think is directed mostly to Dr. Lawrence and Dr. Rasnake. Evolutionary biologists will tell you that there's a trade-off between transmissibility and virulence. And I think this virus, I'm an evolutionary biologist, so been following it and find it particularly interesting in that, as Dr. Rasnake was talking about, there are clearly lots and lots of underreported cases of this virus. But then when you think about virulence, another thing that scares me is that the death toll, the mortality rate for the common flu, is typically, not every year, but in a typical year, 0.1 to 0.2%. We're now looking at, with reported cases, the death toll for this virus being around 2% or so. The death toll, I believe, for the Spanish flu epidemic of 2019, 19, was just about the same. So I'm just thinking, learning from the past, and, you know, I'm not real sanguine about this, that's all.
Spot on for the mortality rate for 1918 was 1 to 2%, but that was an extremely contagious virus. And you know, this thing, even without international air travel, spread around the globe in a matter of months, and it would spread through communities in a matter of days. And the contagiousness chain for flu, you're dealing with incubation periods of 3 to 5 days, and for a pandemic flu virus, maybe 70% of the population would be vulnerable to getting it during the first pass. 1 to 2% was like the early mortality estimate of this. I think that's going to be revised down. Probably, you know, seasonal flu. The last pandemic we had for good old-fashioned influenza was 2009. That was a very bad year. We lost about 100,000 Americans that died of the 2009 pandemic influenza. That was H1N1. And it stressed our community response, not to the breaking point, but to very close in terms of hospital beds and ventilators and things we could do for patients. There was a national shortage of Tamiflu. It was disruptive. And in 2009, H1N1 still killing patients. I still have patients in the hospital right now with severe disease from that pandemic virus. Flu worries me a lot more because it tends to be more aggressive in general. And you know, the seasonal coronaviruses that we have, when they sort of burn through their initial phase, don't seem to be as dangerous as influenza viruses. Influenza is the bad one. When we get another bad pandemic, 2009 was kind of a mild pandemic by historical standards. And it was tough, but we got through it.
All right, I'm right here. My name is Riley. I'm a student here, a journalism student at UT. And I'm wondering, this is probably more directed at Dr. Rasnake, Dr. Gregg, but I'm wondering more about the administrative steps to preventing these mass infections, especially in Knox County and with UT. We're not quite as in close quarters. I mean, if you live in a dorm, you are, but as Knox County Schools, but Knox County Schools has already spent 5 days, I think it is, out because so many of the teachers and then even substitutes were sick and the kids were sick. And this has been happening, I'm a sophomore, so for the last 6 years, this has been very prevalent, especially in Knox County, is that everyone gets sick and then they come to school anyways, because there's an incentive to come to school, and then even there's a legal incentive to come to school. And so I guess I'm wondering, specifically for the university, when do we reach the point where the administration takes the step to say these kids will not, or these students will not be penalized for not showing up to class because they're worried about getting sick?
How do I know I'm not be asked that question? Mine? So actually, what we would do is just get a feel for what was taking place in the community. We would obviously go to our colleagues at the Knox County Health Department to get a feel for what the community infection rate is in regard to it. Look at our class volume, the number of students that are having to miss, the number of faculty that are having to be out, and then just provide that information to campus officials to determine when that call gets made. I think it varies from one situation to the next. So I don't know if there's any, to say that when you reach this number of absences or something, that's when you kick in with some special policy that would allow students to be out without it affecting their grades or something like that. I think it's just going to depend on each situation as it arises. It's kind of like we all wonder when it snows, are we going to have to come into work? And that seems to vary from one time to the next. And I think there's so many factors that go into making that decision that it's kind of difficult for us to, at this point, be able to pin down what it is. But I think we would have a good feel for what it is when that time is there. So we would really, we're meeting regularly, and if we, I can certainly assure you that if we started to have community outbreaks here in the East Tennessee region, that question would rapidly under the
Hello, I'm Caroline. I'm a student here at UT. And I'm just wondering, like, as for the cases of infection, not here, but where they occur, aside from quarantine, what is the course of treatment and how effective is the treatment for the virus?
So there are some experimental use of antiviral drugs that's currently being undertaken. There's an old HIV drug, brand name Menefee, that people are using in some trials right now. There's a newer drug that I can't remember the generic name off the top of my head. Those are basically trials. We don't know if they work. We don't have anything that's been shown to work for coronavirus. It's the old joke that you had a cure for the common cold, you would win the Nobel Prize. Those viruses have been sort of difficult to treat. But we can do a lot for people. We can do a lot for people with respiratory viruses, even if they don't have effective antivirals. Respiratory support, general supportive care, fluids, nutrition. If you saw what was the case with Ebola virus in the Western Hemisphere, Ebola virus cases had a very low mortality rate when treated in Western hospitals, despite the fact that when treated in more austere settings, the mortality rate may have been 70 to 80%. So we can do a lot of things for people even without antivirals.
I'm Julia. I'm also a student here, and I think this is directed to the health department, but how would you say airports are particularly compromised, not necessarily just in China, but like everywhere pretty much, and just air travel in general?
I get to say wash your hands again. That's number two. So with this, again, this is believed to be at this point, again, there's more science to be collected and more data to be analyzed, but really looking like traditional coronavirus, the way it's spread is droplets from person to person, and that means pretty close contact. So that is not, again, passing through people. That the general, like, minimal contact that we say for that is within 6 foot of somebody for 10 minutes. So it's really, if you're, number three, washing your hands and avoiding people who are coughing and trying to stay away from those types of people, not touching your face, your eyes, your nose, your mouth without having unwashed hands, those types of things, you really are in a better position to protect yourself from these types of respiratory infections in general. And so I say it, humorously, but it's really a serious thing, that's the type of thing that will help protect you. And then just, for yourself, avoiding sick people, covering your cough, those types of things really go a long way. So if more people are doing that in the airports, the better off we would be.
Hi, my name's Grace, and I'm a student here, and this kind of goes along with what you're just talking about. But I saw, like, on Facebook, this one up here, but where, like, clothing companies from China, people that were infected were, like, messing with them and then sending them out and then getting people here sick. But is that even possible? Like, can it live off the human body, and if it can, for how long?
I will talk a little bit and then I'll punt it to probably maybe Dr. Rasnake. So I asked that very question today because I expected to get it, this question. So again, all of the science and what we're seeing right now is the primary way this is being spread is direct person to person through droplets, not from clothing and food and things that are being shipped. I'm not concerned about that right now. That's everything that we're seeing at this point in time.
We agree foam might spread as you're getting through. That's kind of stuff you touch in the environment. Hasn't really been demonstrated with this. You will probably see people that claim they find the virus alive on a certain surface for X number of days, and you'll see these stories kind of get sensationalized coverage. But just because you find a virus still on the surface for several days doesn't mean you have a contagious amount of virus or anything that's clinically meaningful. And so we really rely on epidemiologists to feed us that information on what is a truly contagious risk, and it's that close contact, that 3 to 5 foot zone for a fairly long period of time. I would not worry about my clothes shipped from overseas at this point.
Yeah, one of the things that concerns me about the post that you read, if I heard you correctly, was that it was the Chinese people working in these countries were deliberately infecting garments that were coming to the United States. And that's exactly the kind of talk and exactly the kind of attitude that I think we need to be so careful to stop doing and speak against when there is absolutely no evidence that anybody would even want to do that, much less is doing it. So I guess I'm just trying to, make a strong plea that we not, fan the flames of any kind of anti-Chinese sentiment by blaming the Chinese for this in some kind of, simplistic way. These pandemics are, these diseases emerge in China for very complicated reasons. And they emerge in other parts of the world for very complicated reasons. And it's not like they would never emerge in the United States, because there could be those cases as well. It's just we have a very different kind of public health environment and relationship with animals. But please, folks, I can't say it any more strongly, is that that's what we have to not do, is believe those rumors. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
That's not me as a historian. Well, it is.
Historically,
Historically, it happens all the time.
My name is Ann Bowen, and I'm resident in Knox County. And this morning on CNN, there was a really good program about the effect of this virus on the global economic situation. And then when I got here, I was talking to the two gentlemen from radio systems, and we were discussing the effect of this on maybe a future recession or the importing of your various products that are needed for your manufacturing process. Can you gentlemen speak to the effect of this virus on the effect on the global situation and economic situation, and also as to your experience on the effect of importing the goods just in the near, just recently with this virus?
Yeah, I'd say that the timing, because it was Chinese New Year, that we had months ago already put in place orders to cover what we call blackout period. As people return from the holiday and factories get fired back up, and it's so we have prepared for that. Plus, we carry some like the safety stock. So it's the demand during that lead time plus some safety stock to cover us. And things happen, especially if you're in e-com. Amazon comes in and we get Chewy and they start battling on price, and all of a sudden, like, things that weren't selling a month ago are selling rapidly. So we get ourselves in a little bit of trouble. The delay, though, that what we're seeing right now is as we get further and further out, and factories are starting to come back online, but the government's changing the rules every day on applying for licenses. So who gets the license? The larger factories aren't really allowed to go. They're letting smaller ones because they want less people. So there's some reasons behind that. Transportation. The people from our supply chains near the Hubei province, those workers aren't allowed into like Shanghai. You have to show, even to move around, you have to show your your ID several times. And like you were saying earlier, Professor Lawrence, that there's some segregation going on right now. And those people are being really, just to get a train ticket, to get a hotel room. We have a friend that came back from Thailand and, just really finding it difficult to move in Shenzhen just because they're from that province. So, those same people are the ones that are driving our trucks, customs, doing things at port, factory workers. So it's definitely a global impact. And, I don't know if I answered your question, but serious but not grim. Like I think that we definitely have a good team of people. We formed a strike team. I don't know, we got to be 35 people from around the world on it. We have offices in Ireland, Australia, Shenzhen. So we're after it and taking all the different pieces.
I think one of you mentioned that overnight there were 57 new cases that were reported, internationally, and the stock market fell this morning and considerably. So could you, one of you speak to that?
As far as the new cases, I think it's much higher than that on a daily basis. Yep, I believe Apple dialed back their revenue projections recently, and that had a slight impact. But as far as the new cases go, like I said, I think it's much higher than the 50 that you mentioned.
So I know you all mentioned that the coronavirus that's known now is different from the coronavirus that normally causes common cold. Do you all have any idea, based on the science now and what we know about the coronavirus, what its season will be? Will it just be the regular season of the regular common cold?
Impossible to tell at this point. Probably. Again, respiratory viruses tend to follow certain patterns. We see them in the winter, we just don't see them as much in the summer. There's reasons for that. Humidity, temperature, all impacts how long these droplets survive, how close we get to each other changes with the season. So hopefully, it's like the other ones that have came, so it'll probably be a winter thing.
How long does someone affected by the virus do you think should stay quarantined or will stay quarantined?
So the guidance right now is 14 days, and that's on the long end of the incubation period. So travel or from contact with somebody that has had a known case, we're asking them to stay and limit their movements for 14 days. The same goes for somebody who's actually symptomatic if they're in isolation for 14 days or until symptoms subside.
Hi, I'm Skylar. I'm a student here, and I know you spoke on airports and like what we can do to keep ourselves healthy. But are there, when it comes to events like these, do airlines and people and companies who have a big play in like flights and things like that, do they take measures like disinfecting the planes and doing stuff like that, or is it all kind of on us to keep ourselves healthy, like traveling internationally? Wheelhouse.
I cannot speak firsthand, but yes, that's supposed to be part of it. And so it's a large effort to increase their times and frequency of doing disinfecting the airplanes and other places. I mean, and that's general. Again, we'll go back to respiratory illness season. Those are general recommendations that go across the board then. And then there are efforts at this point to follow up with travelers that have been to affected areas and touch base with them, make sure they know their risks and what symptoms to be looking out for, and all the things that they need to do as far as restricting movements and that sort of thing if they're coming from risk areas. There's a lot of different pieces to that. But yes, that should be, have I been on a plane recently and seen that happen? No, because I haven't been on a plane, but that's theoretically what should be happening.
Airplanes as well, in general, you have a very abundant supply of fresh air, and the air kind of flows from top to bottom and is exhausted from the plane. And so if someone next to you has something contagious and they cough on you, you're probably at risk. The farther you are from a person that might be symptomatic in an airplane, they really need to be coughing directly on you or in two seats around you. There isn't like a generalized circulation of something inside an aircraft, and that's kind of an important point to make. There's a lot of myths that they recirculate cabin air to save fuel and breathing the same air as the guy in the back of the plane. You probably have equal air handling that you're using a negative pressure in the hospital in terms of how much that air turns over.
And that's actually a really good point. You can actually go on CDC's website and there is guidance, I believe it's under the public health section. If you look at it, but there's a little diagram of the airplane itself with the, you know, if there's a person infected in this seat, who do we need to be concerned about? And at this point in time, even the people in the immediate seats around them, they're still considered medium risk. So not at a high risk level because of exactly what Dr. Rasnake was saying.
And I have a question. I'm Rachel from Asian Engagement Office, and we have seen, like the student mentioned, that we have seen many information about conspiracy and pandemics and stuff sharing, especially with the prevalence of social media nowadays. So what methods have proven most effective for governments in the past in combating misinformation, fear, and scapegoating in the context of pandemics? And what can Tennessee, the U.S., and China government do or learn from this experience?
That's a big question. As you just said, though, sorry. Social media is a game changer. Social media has really rewritten how we understand social communication. And so even if we were to look to the past, I mean, one of the biggest lessons from various, say, the Manchurian plague from 1911 is absolute transparency by the authorities. And I feel like we get that from the CDC. We're getting that from the World Health Organization. We're getting that, we hope, more and more from China. But it's to the, you know, it's to the Chinese government's interests now to be as transparent as possible. Whether people will believe them is something quite different. And in the past, the way that rumors spread, you know, was in communities, it was by word of mouth, it was in sensationalized newspapers, and then it was damped down by people who refused to spread that information or who wrote in letters to the editor saying that was a sensationalized, you know, piece in your newspaper, you know, that's wrong. So that there was a public forum that was very different from social media today. So unfortunately, that's where I'm hoping that there are sociologists and anthropologists out there right now doing the kind of research that you would like to have them do on how a government can manage social media. But I think that as soon as you say those words, that's censorship. And we know very well that there are governments around the world that are very good at managing social media, and we call them very authoritarian. So if there were some kind of, you know, emergence situation where the fear and the panic is being spread through social media too much, yes, you can shut down social media. Whether that would be wise, I can't possibly answer that question. But it's a game changer.
We've had several meetings with our emergency response team. There's not been a single meeting where this issue of how do we best communicate this and get this out to students, faculty, and staff. So what all of our meetings have had, if not entirely focused on the communication element of it, have all had some degree of that information there within it. Because we understand that getting accurate information out to you is one thing that's going to keep there from being so much concern or worry on campus. So I think making sure that you go to the university's websites that we will have posted, and getting the information from the CDC is where you need to get the most accurate information that you can in regard to this.
I have a comment from Zoom. Chelsea at Donovan again is sharing some of her experiences, and we'd be interested to hear if any of the companies on our panel or in the audience have experienced any of this. They have experienced a lot of issues with getting container shipments booked with the steamship lines. There are various issues, including blank sailings on vessels, which I will define later, lack of truckers in China, customs issues, etc. There are also issues getting space with airlines, refrigerated containers with no plug-ins. And blank shippings means that steamship lines are refusing to call some ports in China because the freight is not there, and in some cases because they would be required to quarantine their vessels before calling another port in another country. So they quote blank sail by cutting a port out of the rotation. So are any companies on the panel or in the audience also dealing with this?
Yes, I mean, that is a growing concern.
It's a growing concern of ours.
We are seeing that some of our containers are being held there at the ports because there's no ships to come in and take them away. I think that's what's going to be in the long term, what's going to be concerning to us when you start thinking of the economic reasons of what, what's going to happen. Because getting the product, again, as John mentioned, we do plan ahead in supply chain where, we understood that the Chinese New Year was coming. So of course you look to get more product at the time and look in advance. And thankfully we had some product already on its way, so I'm comfortable there. But yes, there will be a growing concern if this keeps going on for, another 6-8 weeks. It could be a completely different situation. So unfortunately, again, it's just trying to work and understand what the manufacturers are able to do, what the companies like your freight forwarders are able to do to get the product moving eventually.
Yeah, I'd say that for us, that this sailing vessel that has to be quarantined, the distance from port to port is counted in that 14 days. So you're really only losing about 2 days. If you're moving from China to Vietnam or, shipping materials that way, there's some, I think it's a 5-day difference. So there are some delays happening there. The biggest problem we have is a strategic imbalance of empty containers sitting in yards and nothing coming in. So they don't have anything to take away. So it's going to take some time. And we're asked by our retail partners every day, what's the impact? And it's like right now it's okay. People need time to get started back up. And this moment of uncertainty that I think we're getting some panic buying. We're getting people who are like, I'm going to protect myself, and we're trying to control that through order management. So there's every facet of this supply chain is complex, and we're going to have to monitor every piece of it. And it's the upstream piece, the raw materials. We do sodium silicate, the mines that do the carbonate. So all that, all the way down to how we do a crystal litter for pack. Every piece of that has to be reestablished with people first, and transportation, and so lots of things going on. So.
Hi, I'm Charlotte. I'm an international business student here, and I was wondering about UT's exchange students and their many international students, because I don't know next to anything about the health part, the virus and all, but I do know that UT has a great deal of students who come from Asia and specifically China, and I'm assuming that there's a ton of exchange programs that happen, every semester in that area, at least, if not in China. And so I was wondering, maybe Dr. Gregg knows a little bit about how exchange students and programs and international students are treated at UT.
Well, presently, the Center for Global Engagement has put some restrictions on what our plans are for going into the summer months as far as exchange programs go. All the nuances of each individual program, I'm not aware of, but I know that was one of the first steps that we took, was to say, okay, at this point, who do we need to say, UT is not going to be sending individuals into that. And of the individuals that are already there, who do we need to be trying to get back? If there are individuals that we do need to try to get back. So the international programs have already been looking at that to facilitate avoiding having faculty, staff, and students in those areas where there are concerns, and also looking forward into the summer months about any exchange programs that we have. The more information about that will probably come from the Center for Global Engagement.
So I want to add to that, and actually since the beginning, we have been doing more customized messages to those individuals who are affected by this, especially for the students who are already signed up for the spring programs. We made the decision of canceling the spring programs. So we reached out to those individuals and made sure that they have their academic well-being being taken care of, make sure we place the students in other programs or finding some other placement for them. So that's a top priority for the university. And secondly, we're still evaluating the summer program at this point. We're closely monitoring that. And thirdly, we do have alumni and we have students, visiting scholars from China and in China. So we actually reach out to all the Chinese Alumni Association in China and had the communication with them to make sure that they felt like they're part of the volunteers family and they were taken care of too.
So continuing off of that, oh, I'm Sue Choi, by the way, I'm a Chinese language student. So I was wondering if you guys have an estimate of when it would be safe to travel back to China at this point. I know it's really early, but I know a lot of Chinese students, they're planning on sending abroad in the fall. For me personally, I was I'm graduating in May, so I already applied to programs in China for next year. And it's just, the uncertainty on top of uncertainty is kind of stressing me out. So I just wanted to know if you guys have a rough estimate.
No, not really. Generally, we always say to look at CDC's travel advisories. They're very clear and they're trying to keep them as up to date as possible. But I don't have a good estimate on timing at this point. Kind of a lot of the stuff that we've already talked about that's uncertain at this point is to see how it plays out over the next few weeks and months. And we just don't know it right now.
Well, I'm going to ask a few questions of the panelists that we talked about. Dr. Rasnake, with the many new viruses around the world causing a significant number of deaths, economic disruption, it looks like several of these diseases originated within countries through supply chain. And so I wanted to confirm that in farms and markets. And I mean, what can we do to prevent that? Or is there any measures we can take prevent these outbreaks in the food supply chain?
Zoonotic infections. Zoonotic infections, they're kind of a significant interest of mine. These are things that emerge in animals and spill over into human populations. And a large number, pretty much most of the respiratory viruses we contend with are zoonotic viruses. Influenza is naturally a disease of birds. The most species diversity of influenza viruses is actually in birds. And we're accidental hosts. Once an influenza virus finds its way into humanity, it's on its pathway to extinction. It eventually dies out after a while. But birds and swine are the mixing vessels of influenza viruses. Where you see those animals in close proximity, that's where influenza viruses can reassort, swap the genes, adapt to the human population, and then we're sort of accidental hosts. But in the grand scheme of things, we're kind of a dead-end host. Coronaviruses, they're natural viruses of bats. That seems to be their natural animal reservoirs. And they need an intermediate mixing host, it seems. It was sitted cats with the SARS epidemic of 2003, these little possum-sized creatures. And places where those animals are stored in close proximity, I think the wet market phenomenon is linked with this current outbreak. There's some discussion that the pangolin, which is highly prized for traditional Chinese medicine and other cultural practices, has been linked to possibly being the immediate host of this particular virus. It might be sturgeons, it might be pangolins, some people suggest, I don't know what it is, but it's probably some kind of mammal that was in a wet market close to bats and the virus spilled over. And so when you think about agricultural practices, that would minimize the chance that multiple species of animals are going to be in close contact and maybe a non-optimal public health standpoint from the animal's perspective. That would be the way to avoid those things mixing. If you had massive chicken houses on the same farm that you have hog farms here, you would likely see the same kind of mixing occur if that phenomenon were to be present. But we typically have monoculture on large farms, and by the time it makes it to market, it's generally into a one species thing. The viruses just don't mix. But that's kind of the viruses we deal with in humanity. A lot of times get their start in animals. The most significant pandemic of my lifetime is the HIV pandemic, and it's killed tens of millions of people worldwide. And it started as an innocuous primate virus that spilled over in humans. And has had devastating impact on the world and still kills millions of people a year. So zoonotic viruses are a big deal. From how to prevent them, I think countries need to take a very close look at those agricultural practices, especially when it's agriculture on a grand scale, where these viruses can come together and mix and have these spillover events. Did that answer the question? Yes.
We were talking about supply chain strategies, and do you see anything changing with DeRoyal, like your strategy? Do you see any modifications or stay the course, and you guys figured it out?
We definitely don't have it figured out. Again, I think you stay the course for now. I mean, you can't jump and make a split decision just based upon a short period of time. But after this, I know we will all look at it and see how we can improve on the situation that arose from it. Again, we haven't seen any lack of products coming in just yet, so it's hard for us to determine exactly how we'll face it in the future. Again, we have diversified our facilities and locations already, and so I think that plan has also proven to be good for us.
We can get the audience in.
My name is Min Hua, and I'm with National Custom Printing. Actually, we are the supplier for DeRoyal for the printing. I have one question. So, we see so many the negative impact on the supply chain. Would it be would you guys to consider to bring more manufacturer work here in US? Also, the video system.
Today, DeRoyal actually was founded here in Tennessee, so we've been here for over 45 years. And Pete, the owner, he's actually from a very small town from Virginia, Rose Hill. And so when he started the company, he of course wanted to keep a lot of work here for the people, especially in our Appalachia area. Again, so DeRoyal is set themselves up to maintain that. That was always a wish of Pete's. But then again, we now have the locations in Guatemala, Dominican Republic, and Costa Rica also to take into account, the work that they're able to provide, and also we're able to give back to those communities. So, of course, we always look at keeping as much here in Tennessee as possible, and then we're somewhat localized in the same, hemisphere area. But, anything we can always bring here is just going to be an improvement to our local economy. We want to keep jobs here as much as possible. So if it makes sense, yeah, we'll bring it here, but we have to determine that.
I think for radio systems, we're always looking locally. There's some skill gaps. We've lost some key skills and tool making. Those apprenticeship programs are kind of like, there's very few people that can do that, and a lot of that knowledge transfers in China and Japan. And that makes it really difficult for us. We do a lot of big plastic things, but there are some really good manufacturing facilities. So we know how to lean out a process. We've learned a lot, and being able to, single operator type operations, and if we could save on the logistics costs, those things we're looking at. But I'd say that the more we can do here simplifies our inventories, our planning, and I have to plan 90 days, 120 days in advance. I have to predict what's going to happen 120 days from now. Not so easy. Because in the U.S., it's 7 days. 14 days if I'm coming out of Mexico. So it's we want to build this base up. We have an owner that's very interested in this and talks so frequently about it. How can we improve that? So we're engaging with UT right now on 2 programs, total cost to serve and a total supply network optimization. So Brian's our cost manager. So we're trying to figure out, how do we analyze building in the U.S. Because sometimes you just go off material costs. China and the international markets will win every day. This is total cost model. To have people in place here, ordering materials, receiving it, all that stuff costs time, money, energy. So we're hopeful that we can get a tool that will help us make better decisions. I think that we understand that it's an opportunity for long answer. Sorry.
Hi, thanks. My name is Paul Geller. I'm the Director of Global Studies. I'd like to hear from the epidemiological perspective, the historical perspective. I mean, I know there's a lot of information yet to be learned, but if you could give us a sense of, what more information would you need to know? And what information do you, I mean, yes, we can rely on going to the CDC website, but what do you need to know? At what point would you feel that we know enough to travel back to the areas where there are high levels of infection, or to receive people coming from those areas, and what can we learn from the history of other epidemics and pandemics about the timeline of knowledge about this as opposed to the timeline of rumors?
So I think if you've seen one outbreak of infectious disease, you've seen one outbreak of infectious disease. And it's difficult to generalize. Again, SARS was, not nearly this bad, and it burned itself out in about 9 months. And it was extremely economically disruptive. And in retrospect, it was an economic overreaction. People canceled a lot of commerce with Hong Kong and with Toronto. And there was kind of excessive panic in retrospect for that one. 2009 pandemic influenza hit, and I don't recall it having anywhere near the disruption that this has had. I think because we're used to influenza, we get influenza every year, and coronavirus is a different name. It's, I guess, a new virus. And so my gut tells me I want to believe that we're overreacting to this thing, but because it's so new and we're still waiting for more information, I'm a pretty conservative guy at heart when it comes to preparedness. It's, it's okay to pray for rain to dig a well while you're doing it. Is a lesson that I've been taught many times in life. Is, we can kind of proceed thinking this is going to be not too terribly bad on the global scheme. If you put 1918 pandemic influenza in perspective, what I've seen so far tells me that it's not going to be anywhere near that bad. And so are we overreacting on a global scale to something that might be as bad as 2009? And it might not be as bad as 2003. I just don't know. And I don't know what it will take to have me change except time in terms of what I think about this.
Would agree with that, which is why I like him to go first. I think that we look at epidemiological curves a lot, and it's still on the upward trend. It's not coming back down yet. I think that that's when we'll settle down, but everything that Dr. Rasnake has said is true. There's not a magic ball that tells us now what this is going to do based on the previous experiences, because they all are very, very different. I will say, kind of going on the lines, this is my gut with kind of what Dr. Rasnake was talking about as well. I think when you look at this compared to SARS, when you look at, we're at over 71,000 cases, the vast majority of which are in China. I think when I looked right before I left, we were a little under 800 cases outside of China. That is impressive, and that's showing good public health work happening to contain that to the point that they're containing that right now. And that makes me, hopeful that that will continue to be the trend that we see. That's a big deal when you think about that. And so I think that the actions that are being taken, while they're conservative, because we don't really know quite yet what it's going to look like, I think we're seeing that they're working as well. Will we see more cases? Yes, I have no doubt. But I think that the steps that are being taken, because of the lessons that have been learned over the years, are being impactful at this point. The other thing I just wanted to hit on is, I just thought about this, sorry, it kind of goes along those lines, is we do this kind of stuff a lot and people just don't know about it. We've talked about tuberculosis. We've talked about, we do this where we're reaching out and we're trying to keep people that have infection from infecting other people, and all the work that goes with that happens every day. And so this is just that at a different scale. So the other thing to know and to think about is the practice that's there, and the relationships again that are there to help do that work, whether it's tuberculosis or other infections that happen. That backbone is there, and so that helps to be able to put into play on a larger scale when needed.
Can you talk about the effectiveness of the mask? In 95, I've heard it like not effective.
I can speak to that a little bit, and then maybe my friend can help out. There we go. Okay. Sorry. First and foremost, technically you have to be fit tested to wear an N95. So the general public, if you have not had a fit test to make sure that respirator works for you, you shouldn't really be wearing them, and there's not the science to back that up. So a lot of talk is done about surgical masks for the general public. But when we talk N95s, we're talking healthcare practitioners that have been fit tested to wear them. If they are wearing them properly, they're effective. As far as everything that I've seen, has anybody seen anything different from that? Speaking to the general public, wearing surgical masks, that's a little bit of a different situation. I think that's a lot of times, as Dr. Gregg, I believe, said, when we ask people in healthcare facilities to put on masks, that's to help protect other folks that are around them, just to help contain, if they're coughing and symptomatic, the spread of those diseases. And so that's where we will recommend it. But right now, there's no recommendations across the board for the general American public to go out and buy N95s or surgical masks and to be wearing those in your day-to-day life and activities. That's really, if you go to the doctor and you're sick with influenza, respiratory type symptoms, you're going to be asked to put one on, and that's where we're sitting with that recommendation right now.
I'd like to add something on that. For those of you that aren't as familiar with Chinese culture, in Asian countries and in China, it's very common to wear masks when you're sick, or when you want to not get sick. And so just because somebody that's Chinese has a mask on, it doesn't mean that they're going to potentially infect you. You don't have to be scared. Actually, a lot of people wear masks in China to protect from pollution. I did. I had a black mask with air filter things on it. It was pretty intense looking. It was like Shredder. So that's an important thing to remember. Just because a Chinese person walking down the street has a mask on, it doesn't mean they're about to infect you.
and the Canadians published some excellent literature after SARS that showed they protected their medical staff adequately with plain surgical masks, and that N95 respirators didn't seem to offer any incremental benefit over plain surgical masks for healthcare workers. Out of abundances of precautions we have in our pandemic plan, and for coronavirus, any new virus, we would use the enhanced respirators, the N95s, until we knew the behavior of the agent or we ran out of masks. And just from wearing an N95 mask, I have to wear these things all the time for patient care, and they are not pleasant. 15 to 20 minutes in one, and you start to feel like you're uncomfortable, and wearing them for extended period of time isn't really a practical thing for the average population to consider. And then whether surgical masks would help you or not, no one's really ever demonstrated that. The biggest risk is where people contaminate themselves is they'll often pull the surgical mask down and talk on their cell phone and pull it back up and then rub their eye, and whatever was on the outside of that surgical mask is now in the body. And so if you use these in the hospital environment, they need to be taken off, thrown away. Hand hygiene after contact with the patient. Hand hygiene, Charity? Give some report. So that you don't inadvertently contaminate yourself. And taking PPE off has been shown to be almost as much of a risk as not wearing your PPE in the first place. If you take it off inappropriately and then directly inoculate yourself with something that got on your mask.
I will add one last thing to that, and this goes with it being an emerging or a new infection, is that you will always see that the most stringent guidance starts, and so everybody's in the full PPE for the most part for respiratory stuff. There's lots of layers, but you'll see that, and then as more information is known and there's more of a comfort level, then that will tend to back off. So that's one of the things that we get a lot, we hear about a lot, is when the guidance changes for things like that. That's normal, and that's all based on data, and that's what we want to happen. So be aware that that will happen. I have no doubt probably as this goes on as well that you'll start seeing some of that change as far as what's being recommended when we know a little bit more.
Hello, I'm a student at Belmont University, and I was supposed to study abroad in China this semester. I was supposed to be heading over this weekend, but gradually the news got worse and worse, and now I'm in communication with the people at, it was Hangzhou Normal University. They're telling us just to, wait on what the situation is. From my interpretation of events, it seems like it's probably not happening for me, but my advisors at Belmont are asking me, if they tell you you can come in March, they tell you the semester starting in March, how do you feel about it? And what advice would you or would people who are involved in the UT program recommend to me?
Give travel advice to individuals, but based on the epidemic curve, this thing is not likely to be gone by the end of March. And I cannot predict how the governments with travel restrictions will respond between now and then if the rates are dropping. But it's not going to be gone by March.
So there are two travel warnings. One is on the CDC website. The other is on the state government website. And you all have the links on the handout. So make sure you monitor those. I think that's a great advice to take from the government. Any other questions?
Hey, my name is Channing. I'm a student here. I know you guys say you don't have like a timetable on when this virus will be over with, but I'm traveling and studying abroad in May to throughout Asia. And I was just wondering when I should start being concerned, maybe I need to change my plans.
That's back to the conversation we've been having. I think that you really need to pay close attention to the travel advisories for all the countries that you're wanting to visit, and then make decisions based on those. So, but like Dr. Rasnake said, I would not expect this to be done by May.
science even didn't get the first one. But the question is more for probably Dr. Lawrence. Mr. McDevitt said something that piqued my interest earlier about the social ramifications of this. Historically, has there ever been a precedent of an epidemic or something of that nature causing a significant social change after it is done, whether it be from just so many people die that things changed, or governmental shift, or has there ever been something like that that has caused a rather significant social shift because of an epidemic?
Well, there are two major examples in world history. One is the bubonic plague, 1343 to 50-ish. The other is the epidemics that affected the New World when in contact with the diseases of the Old World with the coming, of Europeans, which was absolutely world-changing for Native Americans. Now, that wasn't a single epidemic or a single pandemic, but every individual community that experienced an epidemic, it was like that for them, to the extent that people say that, it wasn't just a question of who survived, but even after surviving, did you even want to bother to reproduce? So, can that happen again? No, I don't think that's very likely unless we're contacted by people from outer space with new viruses that we've never seen before. That I would not worry about today. But it's a question, yes, there was a significant change in 1918, 1919, but it depends on what you mean by significant. It didn't bring down any governments, so that kind of level of social change. No, societies are relatively stable. When faced with, we don't have the kind of pandemics that really killed that many people. Cholera in the United States at various times caused the downfall of local governments. Yellow fever caused the downfall of local governments, but not national governments. So, I could give small examples, but not worldwide examples, except for the ones that are really famous.
So there's never been one, say, some country got a certain epidemic, and then, like he was mentioning, people were thinking, oh wait, this has changed our lives so much, let's change the system. There's never been really much anything of that precedent. When he said that, I was like, oh, has that ever happened?
No.
The only thing related I can think of that pops in my head, and it's not as I guess it could be for public health people. John Snow and cholera
But
in
that didn't
general.
change the system. No, it didn't change the government.
It didn't change the government. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
No. I'm saying, but it that was an epidemic that led to kind of public health as we know it today. So it's not a societal, it's not a governmental thing. But if you want to read about that, it's for public health nerds, it's really cool to read about how a simple cholera epidemic in London led to what we do with public health in a lot of ways still today.
I think that's a really important story that people talk about in public health, but it's a lot more complicated than that. Okay. Read Death in Hamburg if you want a different story about cholera.
I think that there's, so this is speculation, but there are behavior changes. That China's been growing so rapidly for so long, and people, like I think I said this earlier, but it's that since people got out of college, they've been working really, really hard at long hours, and just after it, this lull. I wonder if there's going to be some behavior change. So that I do have that speculation and conversation. So we have 1 minute left. I don't know if we can squeeze another question.
The student.
Yeah, I'm Jake. Shout out Dr. Lawrence.
That just happened.
So I saw this video of it says supposedly this old man like infected with the virus, the coronavirus, and he's sort of spitting on elevator buttons and just like sort of, I don't know, like smearing it, right? I don't know if it's reliable, but like, is that, like, could you get infected like that? Just because he spits on an elevator?
I'm going to close by saying, wash your hands.
Thank you very much for the questions. They were really good. Thank you, panelists. And then you're going to close us out here?
Thank you so much for coming today. My name is Sheldon Wu. I'm the director of the Asian Studies program. And I really want to thank our panelists today. I for one found that enormously reassuring to dispel some of the rumors and myths and also provide some of the historical context for this. I also want to thank the Center for Asian Engagement and for putting this together, and also the Tennessee China Network. What an amazing amount of pulling this together in a matter of days, which is just a feat in itself. And also, please do fill out the surveys that you see on your chairs, so that for future events we can better gauge your interests and also ways that we can improve this. I also like to thank the sponsor, APIC East Tennessee chapter, and I also really want to thank our student volunteers, which I'm trying to see. Thank you so much. We got these student volunteers from Global Studies. Thank you so much for participating in this. And I also want to say that it's so important for us, I and my colleagues in history and Asian studies and global studies, we're educators. And we really want to prepare our students, not just for their first jobs, but also for their careers. And it's so important for us to get this engagement from the community and from businesses across the state so that we can better prepare our students for their coming careers. And also, Elizabeth Rowland, who is absolutely fatigable and is also hosting another event on Thursday in Nashville at 6:30 with a webcast possibility if you can actually make it to Nashville. And you can sign up for that at tnchinanetwork.org. And I'm told that there are going to be seven panelists for that session. So if you thought this was interesting and want to hear more, you can also take part in that event on Thursday. And we also have Jason.
So we have two students who actually help a lot and bring all the students here tonight, and also you all sign up yourself, so they didn't sign up everyone. So Jason Pan and Sue Choi, they are the presidents, co-presidents of the Chinese Culture Club, and they're here to tell us some of the actions that they want to take to maybe help with the situation in China. Can I have you on stage, Jason?
Hi guys, so as a representative from the Chinese Culture Club, we were wanting to do a ball starter to raise money for different supplies that people in China might need at the moment. And we were hoping to get that started, and we have actually reached out to a certain organization in China in Yichang. Yeah, so they're also within the Hubei province, which is where a lot of this epidemic is concentrated. So really, we're trying to get some supplies to them, get some money, and be able to really help and support them any way we can as we are volunteers, all of us. So I really believe that this is something that really reflects on the spirit of volunteerism. So if y'all could all chip in and help once that ball starter is up and ready, I would love for y'all to be able to do that. Thank you so much.
And you will receive the email.
Yes, you will receive the email from somebody.
And I want to again thank everyone for coming here tonight. And if our panelists have any final comments to add to it.
Wash your hands.
And also, all of the panelists give us some important takeaways again on the brochure you have in your hand. So make sure that if you have any more questions, refer to that. Also, my office of Asia Engagement, I have my business card out. So if you ever have any questions or need any help or anything, just reach out to us. Thank you.